Why did the Admiral freeze like that? Mid-salute, mid-breath, staring at her hands as if he'd seen a ghost. Recruits whispered later that he looked like someone had punched the air out of him. Others thought his vision blurred from the cold. But Cassidy Blake knew the truth the moment their eyes met. He remembered. And she felt the walls she'd built, 5 years of silence, of running from what people wanted to call heroism, begin to crack. She didn't want that title, not then, not now. Heroes had homes, medals, warm hands. Cassidy had nightmares, and scars that never learned to stop burning. The wind tore across the grinder, needles of icy pain against exposed skin. 93 recruits stood in formation at Great Lakes, rigid breathing discipline, boots rooted in frost. No one moved unless commanded. That was the rule. Yet somehow the world shifted around her. The Admiral's old eyes, steel polished by decades of sea and loss, lingered on her hands too long. Hands she kept tucked tight, proper position, palms flat, fingers closed. Hands she prayed the world would forget. Recruit Blake, Crawford's voice earlier had sneered like sandpaper dragging over bone. Hands like those. You think the fleet has time to babysit a pity project? He leaned in so close she could feel the heat of his breath, the stale bitterness of ego disguised as authority. They look cooked, he had whispered, delighted at the shiver he thought he caused. Burnt up. You sure you belong here, or are you someone's wounded charity case? She didn't answer. Silence wasn't weakness. Silence for her was armor. Armor she learned to build in fire. He saw the scars, but he didn't see the fire. He saw weakness, but he didn't see the moment she chose to lose everything so others wouldn't lose their lives. And no one, not even the Admiral, knew she still woke sometimes thinking she was still there, trapped, burning, air turning to knives in her lungs. A voice snapped across the formation, crisp and cutting. Carry on. The Admiral walked on, posture rigid, hands clasped behind him to hide the tremor she saw barely, but enough. Enough to tell her he knew, enough to terrify her. She couldn't breathe for a second, not because of authority, but exposure. It was happening again. The moment someone recognized the ghost she used to be, everything after became noise. The world narrowed to pounding pulse, cold air, and the hollow echo of memory pressing into the present. Nicole Hartman, her bunkmate and God, she didn't want to say friend, that word felt breakable, stood 3 down the line. She saw it. The flicker in Cassidy's eyes. The way her jaw clenched, not in fear but in preparation, like someone bracing for shrapnel. Platoon dismissed, boots moved, voices rose, life resumed like normal. Except nothing inside Cassidy was normal. Nicole caught her shoulder as she passed. What was that? The worry, the fire in her voice. Cassidy almost smiled, almost, but her throat felt tight. Nothing. Lie. But some lies are survival, some truths are triggers. They marched toward barracks as the base buzzed with its usual symphony of discipline. Cadence calls, distant whistles, metal on concrete, steel doors slamming like punctuation marks on obedience. Her fingers flexed out of habit, scar tissue tugging, nerves sparking phantom pain. Everyone else saw damaged skin. Only she felt the ghost of heat still living in every nerve ending. Fire didn't end. It stayed. It reshaped you until nothing about you fit anymore. At the barracks entrance, Nicole hesitated. He knew you, the Admiral. Why did he look like that? Cassidy stared straight ahead. If she looked at Nicole, her voice might break, and she had run out of permission to break years ago. Please, Cassidy whispered, not right now. Nicole nodded. That was one thing about her. She knew when to push, when to stand guard, when to sit beside someone in silence. Trauma recognizes trauma. Both of them carried ghosts. Different battles, same wounds. Inside, metal bunks lined in perfect rows. Recruits moving like machinery. Cassidy sat on her rack, elbows on knees, hands hanging limp between them. She tried breathing exercises, in through nose, out through mouth. She used to do them in hospital beds while machines beeped nearby, each beep reminding her she was alive when she sometimes didn't want to be. A door slammed somewhere. The sound was too close to metal collapsing in fire. She flinched, small, quick, but she hated it. Hated how the past ambushed her without warning. Hated how memories had teeth. Her vision blurred. Not tears, she hadn't let herself cry in years. No, this was panic squeezing vision into a tunnel, narrowing world to a point. She needed quiet, 5 minutes, 10. But she didn't get time, not in basic. Silence wasn't allowed, rest wasn't granted, weakness was prey here. Crawford's voice boomed through memory again, like a storm she couldn't outrun. "You're fragile, Blake, you'll crack." He had no idea. Cracking was surviving. Shattering and still choosing to wake up anyway, that was strength. She forced air into lungs, steady, controlled, each breath a command, each inhale a war. Nicole returned, sat beside her silently, offering presence instead of questions. It grounded her. It didn't cure anything. Trauma doesn't grant mercy, but it steadied the shaking floor beneath her. "Whatever you're running from," Nicole murmured finally, "you don't have to run alone." Cassidy stared at her hands instead. "Some things follow you no matter where you go." Nicole didn't argue. Truth like that didn't need debate. Across the base, behind glass offices and polished brass nameplates, the Admiral sat alone staring at a secure screen. Her medical file, photos, burn damage patterns the public never saw. He remembered, he'd never forgotten. A civilian, a fire, a choice that shouldn't have existed. Hands pressed against death to save people who would never know her name. He looked at the parade ground from the window. Recruits marched like tiny figures in a toy battlefield, and among them, the ghost who once saved a ship. He rubbed a hand over tired eyes. "My God," she came back. Not to glory, not to honor, she came to serve quietly, to hide in uniform and routine, to become no one so she could finally breathe. It was almost tragic, he thought, how heroism sometimes returns disguised as humility. He made a call, quiet, controlled, like something sacred. "Captain Lawson, there's a recruit. Cassidy Blake, keep an eye on her, discreetly." He didn't say why, didn't need to. Authority has its own language. Back in the barracks, night crept slow, lights dimming, boots stacked neatly like obedience on display. Recruits slid under thin blankets, tension loosening only because exhaustion demanded mercy. Cassidy lay on her back, eyes tracing ceiling shadows like ghosts passing. Sleep didn't feel safe. Sleep meant dreams. Dreams meant fire. But her body couldn't keep going without surrender, so she drifted, breath trembling. And for a moment, just one, she wasn't on a bunk. She was back in steel corridors, back in smoke, back in heat that crawled under skin like an enemy serpentine and merciless. A warning siren screamed in memory. Metal groaned in protest. Someone shouted orders she couldn't hear over the roar. Her hands reached for a panel melting beneath her touch. Flesh blistering. Pain like nothing earth-born. 60 seconds felt like eternity bleeding slow. She didn't scream then, not because she was brave, but because she didn't have air left to scream. The bunk beneath her shifted. A recruit rolled over, and she was yanked back to the present like surfacing from a deep ocean. Cassidy gasped, hand clamped over her mouth to trap the sound. Sweat soaked her collar. Her heart beat like fists against ribs. Silence pressed heavy, her breathing small but sharp. Then, a whisper across the darkness. "You okay?" Nicole again, voice barely audible, concern without intrusion. Cassidy whispered back, "Just tired." Lie necessary. The barracks returned to quiet. Bodies slept. The building hummed its military lullaby of pipes and vents and distant boots. Cassidy stared at her hands in dim light. Scarred, imperfect, alive, every nerve buzzing, every inch a reminder that she survived something she never wanted credit for. Finally, she breathed again, slow, steady. "You can do this. One more day. Just keep moving." Outside, wind howled across open concrete like a ghost searching for someone. The base stood silent, unaware that history slept in the second row, hands folded, heart still fighting flames the world never saw. In the darkness of her bunk, she whispered barely loud enough for herself to hear, words she once clung to when fire devoured everything. Survive first, heal later. But she already knew the truth. Healing never came easy for people who burned for others. Sometimes the flames never go out. They just take a new shape. And tomorrow, someone would test her again. And tomorrow, she would stand again. And tomorrow, she would try quietly, painfully, not to break. What if tomorrow wasn't about strength? What if tomorrow was about secrets, and who noticed them first? The morning didn't rise so much as break open across the base, light slicing through dorm windows and catching dust like drifting memory. Reveille wasn't a bugle here, it was a shout, a boot stomp, a system built to rip sleep out from under you and replace it with duty. Cassidy blinked awake before the speakers blared. Pain had been her alarm long before the Navy. Scar tissue tightened with the cold. Her hands ached like they remembered heat too vividly to ever forget. She sat up slow, mechanical, the way someone learns to move when body and mind question each other every morning. Will you get up again? Yes. Will you break today? Not yet. Boots hit the floor around her in a staggered chorus, tired recruits transforming back into uniformed parts of a machine. Nicole met her eyes from across the aisle, the kind of look that asked a question without needing sound. Cassidy answered with a nod, the closest she ever came to saying, "I'm still standing." Breakfast was oatmeal, rubber eggs, and the kind of coffee that tasted like punishment. Recruits moved in lines, eat, breathe, march, endure. It was a rhythm, and rhythm meant control. Most days. Most. Outside, frost still on the asphalt. Their breath hung in the air like ghosts of warmer days. Petty Officer Crawford waited with the sharp impatience of a man who mistook authority for power. Fall in. They moved, boots clicked, silence dropped like a command. His eyes paused on her, not curiosity anymore. Something new, something ugly. She saved his brother yesterday, and he hated that he owed her anything. Gratitude is easy when you admire someone, hard when you've belittled them. He barked orders, but his voice lacked the usual venom. Gratitude had introduced hesitation. That mattered. Weakness in a man like him always mattered. But it also made him dangerous. Nicole whispered just loud enough for Cassidy to hear, "He's different today." Cassidy didn't respond. She already knew. She could feel Crawford's conflict in the air like static waiting for spark. The day unfolded with drills, classroom lectures, knot tying, water survival prep, routine, steady, exhausting. But nothing about routine calmed her mind. Routine meant time to think. Thinking meant remembering. And none of her memories were kind. At combat life-saving lecture, her hands trembled when the instructor passed around an intubation kit. She steadied them anyway, quietly, subtly, pressing her thumb against her palm until nerves reset. A decade ago, she was precise enough to build weapons systems, guide engineers, handle circuitry thinner than hair. Today, she fought to hold a plastic tube steady. When the instructor asked questions about airway compromise, Cassidy answered without thinking, clear, concise, textbook perfect. A few recruits turned their heads. Whitfield raised an eyebrow like she'd broken character. People here didn't expect excellence from her. They expected endurance, maybe quiet misery, not skill. Every time she revealed competence, eyes sharpened. Questions formed. Questions she wasn't ready to answer. She needed anonymity like oxygen. Some people hid because they were cowards. She hid because she didn't want anyone worshiping the ashes of what fire turned her into. At noon drill, Crawford corrected a recruit's stance with too much force, anger looking for direction. He wasn't ready to confront gratitude, so he burned the edges of everything else. Cassidy didn't flinch when his shadow crossed her boots. She survived worse men than him, worse flames than ego could ever burn. But it was Crawford who cracked her guard that afternoon. It was Megan, quiet, analytical Megan, who asked in the hallway, "Where'd you learn combat medical protocols like that?" Cassidy paused mid-stride. Not accusation, not suspicion. Curiosity, almost admiration. She searched for the lie. Lies are tools, but sometimes the simplest lie is truth trimmed to bone. "A job I had before." Megan nodded as if that answer held weight instead of holes. "Remind me never to underestimate you." Cassidy almost smiled. It felt foreign. Afternoon chow brought heat to cold cheeks and the hum of conversation like static settling nerves. The cafeteria staff moved with practiced grace. Dorothy from the serving line slipped her an extra biscuit without comment, kindness disguised as nutrition. Kindness always felt dangerous, like it could crumble armor more effectively than cruelty ever did. Across the room, Whitfield leaned back smug, manicured arrogance in a sailor suit. Marcus beside him snickered at some joke whispered behind a palm. When Whitfield's gaze drifted toward her, Cassidy lowered her eyes to her tray. Highborn boys always needed someone beneath them. Their worlds collapsed otherwise. Garrett Holmes, the former firefighter who steadied her voice in the gas chamber, dropped his tray opposite her. "You breathe better today," he said, quiet. "Good." He wasn't judging, he wasn't prying, he was simply observing survival. That felt safe. "Thanks." "Confidence chamber messes with everyone," he continued. "But the look you had," he hesitated, "that wasn't the gas." She didn't answer. Silence again, defense disguised as discipline. Garrett nodded like he understood. He probably did. Firefighters know trauma like soldiers do, not from theory, but from proximity to flame. "You kept someone alive yesterday," he said. "Just so you know, some of us saw who you are, not who they think you are." Her throat tightened. Praise tasted like guilt, always. Before she could respond, the base PA system crackled. "All personnel, commanding officers assembly at 1800 hours. Auditorium, dress whites." The cafeteria paused. Tension swept like wind before rain. Assemblies weren't normal mid-training. They meant something big. Awards, punishments, policy updates, or worst, someone important noticed something. Cassidy's stomach dropped. Nicole whispered, "You think it's about yesterday?" Cassidy stared ahead. "I hope not." But hope was fragile. She didn't trust it. Hours later, dress whites crisp, formation marched toward the auditorium, footsteps synchronized like heartbeat in concrete. The building loomed sharp lines, military pride etched in brick and steel. Inside, lights glared off polished floors, making everything look too exposed. Recruits filed in, filled seats. Instructors lined the sides. Silence settled heavy. Then the Admiral entered. Even silence seemed to stand at attention. His eyes scanned the room and stopped on her, not long enough to be obvious, but enough. Cassidy's lungs locked. Nicole's hand brushed hers under the seat like grounding wire. "You're not alone," except she was. The moment truth hunts you, only you feel the rifle scope. Admiral Kirkland stood at the podium. "Recruits," he began, voice weathered low, steady like a ship's hull cutting through storm water. "You will learn many things here: discipline, honor, courage." Crawford watched stiffly at the side, jaw tight, like he expected recognition for molding soldiers from clay. But the Admiral's tone shifted, softer, heavier. "But there is a kind of courage you cannot teach. The kind that chooses duty when it costs more than anyone else will ever know." Cassidy's pulse hammered. Her hands curled tight in her lap. She held breath like oxygen debt could hide her. "Some serve loudly," he continued. Some serve quietly, some serve unseen, a pause, a breath, until sacrifice reveals who they always were. A rustle moved through recruits, curiosity, confusion, anticipation. Crawford's face flickered. Nicole's fingers tightened on Cassidy's sleeve. Megan leaned forward. Garrett held his breath. Cassidy stared at the floor, heart climbing her throat. The Admiral opened a folder. Her ribs turned into a vice. Time slowed like fear dragging it down. His next words cut the air like a whisper meant to be heard by the soul, not the ear. There is one among you who gave more than most will ever be asked to give. Not yet. Please, not yet. Someone whose hands bear witness to courage under fire. Her pulse stuttered. Someone who stood alone in a moment when everyone else would have fled, and lived not because fate spared her, but because duty demanded she stay. A murmur, heads turning, eyes scanning, rose. Nicole's breath hitched, Garrett's jaw tensed, and Crawford, his eyes narrowed with dawning horror and something else, shame. Cassidy closed her eyes, no prayers left, no shadows to hide behind. Admiral Kirkland's voice lowered, reverent like memory bending to honor. She once bore a different name, but the world didn't deserve it, so she chose hers anew. Silence swallowed the room whole. Fear and resignation coiled tight in her chest. Truth touched her shoulder like a burning hand. And when he spoke again, it was not loud, but it echoed deeper than a shout. She is here among you now. He looked directly at her. And Cassidy Blake felt the weight of 5 years collapse in her chest, like a bulkhead giving way to flood. This was it. Exposure. Recognition. The past clawing out of the fire to drag her back. Only instead of saying her name, the Admiral let the silence linger, a mercy or a warning she couldn't tell. Then he closed the file slowly, respectfully. You will meet her in time, he finished, when she chooses to step forward, not before. Relief didn't come. Relief rarely comes after fear. Instead came pressure, a slow collapse, a realization heavier than metals. He didn't expose her. He protected her. And somehow that felt just as terrifying. Because now she owed something again. The auditorium exhaled as he concluded. Courage is not always loud. Sometimes it simply refuses to vanish. Dismissal rang out, recruits rose, boots echoed, voices surged like surf. Cassidy couldn't move. Nicole stayed beside her, solid as anchor weight. He was talking about you. Cassidy swallowed, her voice quiet, raw, he shouldn't have. You earned it. Cassidy shook her head slow. I survived, that's different. Megan leaned in. Survival is harder. Garrett met her eyes. You don't have to run here, not anymore. But she didn't believe that. You can run from flames, you cannot run from memory. She stood finally, legs steady only because she refused to let them shake. Outside, cold bit skin like truth bites pride. Crawford watched her go. Not with hostility, not with victory, with something closer to reckoning, the look of a man realizing he had been cruel to someone braver than he would ever be. Recognition can wound more deeply than insult. And Cassidy walked back toward barracks with one thought echoing inside her like an unsteady heartbeat. Being seen hurts more than fire. Tomorrow wouldn't be easier. Tomorrow meant questions. And tomorrow, someone, maybe everyone, would want the story behind her scars. She wasn't sure she had the strength to speak it. Because sometimes the hardest battlefield isn't the one you survive. It's the one you remember. And tonight, alone in her bunk, she whispered to the dark the only truth she trusted. I wasn't ready to be found. But war, in all its forms, doesn't wait for readiness. And neither does redemption. What if the thing she feared most wasn't being exposed, but being needed again? Morning arrived without mercy, sunlight cutting through barracks windows like interrogation lights. Cassidy lay awake before alarms, staring at the ceiling, listening to breaths around her, some calm, some restless, some dreaming without fear, some fighting battles in silence just like her. She envied the ones who slept without flinching. Reveille hit, boots thudded down from bunks, water ran in sinks, discipline lived in repetition, survival in silence. Cassidy dressed slow, methodical, muscle memory replacing thought. Hands ached as she laced boots, skin tight like old leather stretched over old wounds. She flexed once. Pain answered like an old companion. Control steady, quiet. Nicole nudged her shoulder lightly. Today's special. Nothing is special here. It is now. Nicole's smirk fought fatigue. Don't pretend you didn't hear the whispers all night. Whispers? No, they weren't whispers. They were suspicions wearing footsteps. And she felt every footfall. They marched to chow. Nicole peeled off for formation prep. Cassidy carried her tray, oatmeal and black coffee and the weight of eyes. Garrett waved her over, not loudly, not expectantly. He sat alone again, posture relaxed but watchful, like someone who once sat in burning buildings waiting for collapse, knowing calm was temporary. She sat across from him. Silence held for a breath, 2, 3. Finally he asked, gentle but sharp, "You okay?" Dangerous question, too open, too kind. She nodded, just tired. Another practiced lie. Garrett didn't push. He took a slow sip of coffee. Command doesn't say words like that lightly. She didn't answer, couldn't. Then he said the thing she didn't expect, quiet, nearly reverent. "You don't owe anyone your scars." Her throat tightened. People think survival gives you wisdom. It doesn't, it gives you ghosts. Before she could respond, Boots approached. Heavy, confident, not recruit Boots, authority Boots. Captain Lawson stopped beside the table. Every muscle in Cassidy's body braced. "Recruit Blake." His tone was controlled, neutral, but his eyes carried curiosity sharpened to duty. "When you finish chow, report to the Training Operations Office. Dress in PT gear." Cassidy's stomach didn't drop. It clenched like metal seizing under heat. "Yes, sir." Lawson nodded and walked on. Garrett's gaze followed him. "Ops office. That's above instructor level. Something's moving." "I don't want anything moving." "That doesn't matter," Garrett replied. "When command sees you, your story moves whether you like it or not." He said it like he knew that feeling. Maybe he did. After chow, Cassidy changed and marched to the operations building. Cold wind bit her cheeks, breath turning to frost in the air. Nerves flickered like exposed wire beneath her sternum. Inside, fluorescent lights buzzed. Hallways smelled of printer ink, disinfectant, and the kind of quiet that hides decision-making. An admin petty officer glanced up, recognized her, and stiffened. Through that door, recruit. Behind the door, Captain Lawson and Lieutenant Arno waited. A screen lit the room with glowing maps and tactical overlays. Not classroom slides, not theory. Real operations, real geography, real targets. Cassidy froze at the threshold. This room didn't belong to trainees. It belonged to the future, to missions, to decisions that carried weight and consequence. Lawson motioned, "At ease, come in." She stepped forward, back straight, eyes front. Arno studied her with a clinical appraisal, the kind used for equipment and operators alike. "We reviewed your aptitude scores." Her stomach twisted. She aced tests without meaning to. Knowledge leaked out of her like flame through cracks, impossible to contain. "You scored unusually high in avionics concepts, navigation, systems theory, troubleshooting, emergency protocols." She said nothing. Silence was self-defense. Lawson continued, "Most recruits don't get flagged this early, but your ability set aligns with advanced technical pathways." She knew what that meant. Specialized tracks, roles that required intelligence, nerves calm in chaos. Roles she once fit. Roles she didn't want anymore. We'd like to evaluate you for aviation tech prep cycle. Her pulse stuttered. Aviation, engine, fire suppression systems, fuel lines, emergency procedures. Flashback heat kissed her skin like memory igniting. A corridor lined with sparking cables, smoke suffocating, screams muffled by metal, hands melting against a hatch handle refusing to turn. No. She blinked hard, returning, breathing shallow. I didn't request a track, she managed. Talent requests you, Arno replied simply. Cassidy clenched her jaw. She wasn't here to excel. She was here to blend in, to serve quietly, invisible, untouchable, safe from expectation. Lawson keyed the screen. A simulation bay cam feed appeared, obstacle rigs, emergency panels, hydraulic fault stations. You'll run diagnostics in simulation, no pressure. A lie, pressure always lived here. Cassidy swallowed. She could refuse, but refusal drew eyes. And eyes were the enemy. She nodded once. They walked her down hallways into a sealed training bay. Lights hummed. Machines waited. Cold concrete underfoot. The smell of wiring and metal familiar, haunting. Station unlocked. Begin when ready. Behind glass, instructors watched. Clipboard silhouettes. Evaluation eyes. She approached the aviation systems panel. Buttons, circuit diagrams, warning lights. Hands hovered. Flash, heat roaring behind her like a beast breathing fire down her neck. Screams swallowed by steel. Skin blistering as she reached again. Stop. She inhaled through her teeth. Pain sharpened her focus. She moved. Switch off manual override. Vent bypass valve. Fuel isolation. Stabilize. Emergency coolant. Seal system. Reroute comms. Her hands shook not from confusion but memory, yet she finished. Task light flicked green. Lawson's eyebrow lifted. 36 seconds. Manual simulation usually takes beginners 2 minutes. Process memory, she said quietly. Arno scribbled a note. Not memory, conditioning. Lawson nodded once. Again, randomized faults. The next simulation cascaded failures. More complex. Intentional overload, sparks in memory. Not here but once long ago. She shut it down in under a minute. A murmur behind glass. Impressed, concerned, evaluating. She hated it. When instructors finally dismissed her, her lungs burned like she tried to run underwater. Outside, cold air slapped her skin. She leaned against the brick wall behind the ops building, eyes closed tight, breath uneven. Trauma doesn't ask permission. Every panel she touched whispered past flames. Every switch smelled like burning insulation and fear. Every successful task felt like a trap luring her back to a life she'd sworn never to relive. Footsteps approached. Crawford. Of all people. He stood a few feet away, hands clasped behind him. Not aggressive, not smug. Something else stripped of ego, searching for footing. I spoke to the Admiral this morning. She stiffened. He didn't tell me details, Crawford continued. Just that I had misjudged you. Silent, sharp as broken glass. He exhaled through his nose, not anger, frustration at himself. I thought you were hiding weakness. Turns out you were hiding strength. His voice dropped. I don't like being wrong. Cassidy finally opened her eyes. Then start looking more carefully. Crawford blinked, surprise, respect, discomfort tangled together. You saved Whitfield's life. Then you saved a simulation most tech recruits fail. You're not just competent, Blake. You're something else. She looked away. I don't want to be something else. That's not how this works, he said softly. Ability comes with demand. You can't choose small when you're built for big. Anger flickered, bitter, quiet, tired. I didn't ask for any of this. No, Crawford murmured, but people need soldiers who don't run from fire. She froze. Not fair, too accurate, too cruel. He stepped back, voice steady. There's a mission prep roster forming. Early screening for advanced operators. You're on the watch list. Her chest constricted. Take me off. I can't. She swallowed a shake. I don't want missions. Crawford studied her like he finally saw the truth, not strength, but pain stitched together into duty. Want doesn't match her. She turned fully. It does to me. He hesitated, then nodded once slow. I'll tell the Admiral you resist placement. It wasn't a concession, it was a warning. Be ready to defend your choice. He walked away. Cassidy leaned against cold brick again, heart pounding. She didn't fear bullets, didn't fear men, didn't fear orders. She feared duty dragging her back to fire. Because she had learned something no training pipeline, no combat manual, no motivational speech ever admits. Survival isn't the hard part. Living after is. She didn't want glory. She didn't want missions. She didn't want to be the person the uniform recognized before she recognized herself. She just wanted quiet. But quiet isn't given to those who once chose to burn for others. Quiet has to be earned. And she wasn't sure she had anything left to earn it with. What happens when the past you ran from decides to catch up at the exact moment the world expects you to lead? The fourth morning came colder than the others, cold that bit hard enough to remind every recruit why discipline mattered. Frost still clung to railings. Breath drifted like smoke, as though the universe exhaled doubt into the air. Cassidy woke before reveille again, body tense, mind buzzing like a live electrical wire trapped beneath skin. She sat up slow, hands stiff, heart heavy. Today felt different, like the air shifted overnight, like someone moved the ground beneath her and expected her to march anyway. Nicole sat on the edge of her bunk already dressed. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her eyes said I'm here in a way that felt heavier than words. Cassidy laced her boots, slow, deliberate, a ritual for soldiers, a prayer for survivors. Reveille cracked open the silence. Yelling, schedules, footsteps, routine, blessed and cruel at the same time. As they headed toward muster, Whitfield's voice floated behind them, too loud, too casual. So, our mystery recruit has secret friends in high places. His tone wasn't admiration. It was resentment wrapped in privilege. Cassidy ignored him. Nicole didn't. You jealous someone earned attention instead of inheriting it, she shot back. Whitfield smirked. I don't need to save anyone to matter. That's the saddest thing you've ever said, Nicole muttered. Marcus laughed under his breath. Garrett stepped up from behind, moving beside Cassidy like it was a natural slot he always belonged in. You good? He asked quietly. I'm here, she replied. It was the closest she came to admitting anything. Garrett nodded, silent understanding in the way first responders could see ghosts without needing confirmation. They marched, they trained, drills bled into academic review, classroom lights humming, chalk squeaking, nerves tightening. The instructors watched her now, not openly but enough. It was subtle, the way their eyes lingered half a second longer when she answered, the way even silence felt like it was listening. Then came the announcement. Selected recruits, report to mental readiness evaluation. Crawford stood at the head of the hallway, clipboard in hand, eyes scanning names. When he spoke hers, something flickered in his face, not power, not command. Regret. Blake. A subtle murmuring rolled through the hallway like a ripple of suspicion. Selected, flagged, marked by command. It meant something was brewing. Nicole touched her sleeve once, firm and quick, reassurance disguised as habit. Garrett gave one short nod, like a soldier saying, don't forget who you are. Whitfield scoffed under his breath. Of course she gets pulled. Cassidy inhaled once, slow, and followed orders. Psych evaluations weren't dramatic. They were worse, quiet rooms, soft voices, silence sharpened by observation. Dr. Hale sat across from her, pen poised, warm eyes, controlled tone, polished calm, the kind professionals use when they expect you to break slowly rather than shatter. "Tell me," Hale began softly, "why did you join the Navy?" Cassidy stared at the simple wooden table between them. "Service." Hale smiled gently. "That's a word, not a reason." Silence stretched like tension wire. Cassidy swallowed. "I needed a purpose." "Needed," Hale repeated, picking at the thread without pulling too hard, as though something was missing. Cassidy kept her tone flat. "Everyone needs something." Hale leaned in slightly. "And what did you lose?" She felt heat rise under her skin. Her hands tightened. She didn't look away. "I'm not here for therapy." "No," Hale agreed. "You're here for clarity, big difference." That was the problem. Clarity cuts deeper than questions ever will. Hale studied the scars without staring rudely, practiced, respectful. Pain changes the nervous system. Trauma rewrites the brain. But sometimes, trauma also forges people into what others cannot become. "I don't want to become anything." Hale nodded as though that answer confirmed more than it concealed. Avoiding identity isn't the same as lacking one. Cassidy breathed out slowly. "I served once, differently. I want to serve again, quietly." Hale's pen stopped writing. "Quietly," she repeated. "Is that desire or punishment?" Cassidy didn't speak. If she opened her mouth, words might spill out she never meant to share. When the evaluation ended, Hale spoke one final sentence, gentle but heavy enough to sit on her bones. "The only people who run from purpose are those afraid of finding it again." Cassidy felt like she had been dissected without a scalpel. Outside, wind slapped cold against her face. She needed air, motion, noise, anything but silence that remembered too much. But silence wasn't given. Orders screamed from across the courtyard. "Night terrain endurance, form up at 1800. Groans rose, hardest evolution so far. Midnight navigation, weighted rucks, cold that crawled into bones, the kind of challenge that strips away excuses. And she welcomed it. Pain was easier than thought, motion easier than memory. When night fell, moonlight cut silver across the training grounds. Recruits strapped rucks, checked laces, braced minds. Breath clouded like ghosts fleeing lungs. Nicole fell in beside her. "Psycheval eat you alive." It scratched at the door. "You hold it good," Nicole whispered. "Just don't lock it forever." Cassidy didn't respond. Emotion was a battlefield she avoided. Crawford's voice boomed. "You will navigate marked checkpoints. You will move until sunrise. No failures, no complaints. The fleet does not care about your comfort." He paused as his gaze passed over Cassidy. "But it respects your resilience." He didn't say her name. He didn't need to. They began. Mud, frost, roots grabbing at boots, darkness wrapping everything in survival instinct, breath burning, weight dragging shoulders down, bodies breaking pace, cold chewing edges of stamina. Nicole kept steady beside her until a hidden log tripped someone ahead, chaos, bodies stumbling, curses cutting the air. Marcus twisted his ankle. Whitfield erupted. "Move, you're slowing the pack." Cassidy pivoted back instantly. Instinct. Muscle memory from old fire corridors where leaving someone meant death. Marcus winced in the dirt, fear behind his pride. "Pressure test," Whitfield snapped. "He fails, he falls." Cassidy's jaw tightened. "Help me lift him." Whitfield scoffed. "He's dead weight." "No, he's ours," she said quietly. Garrett appeared from the darkness like reinforcement called by loyalty rather than rank. Together they hauled Marcus upright. Slow, gritted teeth, sweat mixing with frost. Whitfield watched, arms crossed, voice sharp. "You think you're hero training already?" "No," Cassidy replied. "I think we don't abandon people." Whitfield's lips twitched, confusion and arrogance wrestling. "That's not how the world works out there." I know exactly how the world works out there. Cassidy steadied Marcus, which is why we do better here. Garrett met her eyes, respect fully formed now, not hesitant. Nicole forced Whitfield forward with a shove. You break alone someday, we'll see who helps you. The march resumed, brutal, relentless. Miles swallowed under boots, frostbite nipping fingers, sweat freezing against skin. Cass's scars flared like someone lighting matches across her palms, phantom flames licking nerves, memory bleeding into muscle. Her breath shortened, heart hammering. A flash corridor smoke, glow of flames, heat searing bone deep. She stumbled. Garrett caught her arm. You good? She nodded automatically, lie by reflex. Nicole wasn't fooled. You're shaking. It's cold. It was not that cold. Garrett leaned in, voice low. When it gets bad, anchor to something, not the memory, the moment, the person, the ground, here now. She swallowed. Now. Ground beneath her boots. Cold on her skin. Breath in her lungs. Shoulder under her hand, his. Alive. Not burning. Not alone. She pushed forward, one step, then another. Pain didn't retreat, it never does, but it stopped winning. By sunrise, recruits collapsed onto benches near the parade yard, muscles trembling, silence thick as fatigue. Crawford crossed the group slowly, measuring faces, pride hidden behind instruction. You learned tonight, he said, not shouting, speaking like truth instead of order. Pain reveals character. His gaze landed on Cassidy last. Something changed in it, not softness, but recognition and burden. You carry weight others don't, he murmured, barely audible. She stared ahead, then don't add to it. He exhaled a quiet surrender. I won't. Whitfield limped nearby, wrapped in a blanket, exhausted but upright. He avoided her eyes, not from resentment, from shame. He whispered to Marcus when he thought no one heard, she didn't have to help you. Marcus answered weakly, that's why she did. Garrett sat beside Cassidy, offering a protein bar without ceremony. Nicole leaned against her shoulder, half asleep but present. The three of them forming a small, tired, unspoken alliance. Cassidy stared at the sunrise, pink staining ice and steel. She came here to disappear. Now command watched her, psych evals probed her, instructors shifted tone, fellow recruits followed her lead, even those who hated her felt indebted. She wasn't vanishing. She was being pulled back into light, the exact place she never wanted to exist again. Because fire doesn't just destroy. It forges. And forged steel doesn't get to choose whether people notice its strength. She whispered to the dawn, barely breath. I'm not ready. But readiness never mattered to destiny. Some people don't chase purpose. Sometimes purpose hunts them. And in her bones, raw, tired, scarred, she felt the truth. Hiding was ending. And something bigger, heavier, unavoidable was waking. When does a secret stop being protection and start becoming a prison? 3 days after the night endurance march, the base felt different, the air heavier, the silence sharper. Cassidy noticed it first in the way instructors looked at her, not with suspicion but with decision forming behind their eyes. That was worse. Suspicion was distance. Decision was destiny sharpening its blade. The Navy wasn't trying to figure out who she was anymore. They were deciding what to do with who she might become. Morning formation blurred into PT, bodies strained, breath clouded, cadence calls cracked across pavement, and when her foot hit the ground wrong on the final lap, a jolt shot up her leg, not pain, warning. Old injury tucked somewhere inside bone and memory. She stumbled only half a step, but Garrett noticed anyway. You're limping. I'm fine. You say that the same way drowning people say they're swimming. Cassidy didn't respond. Pain meant nothing to her. Pain meant alive. She could live with pain. It was silence she feared. Silence meant memory had room to speak. After PT, they formed up near the flagpole. Captain Lawson approached with an envelope in hand, thick paper, official seal. His steps deliberate, his posture grave. A few recruits straightened instinctively, feeling the shift in atmosphere even if they didn't understand it. He stopped in front of her. A pulse slammed inside her ribs. "Recruit Blake," Lawson said, voice steady but heavy. "Report to Intelligence Screening Office Bravo." Garrett's head snapped toward her. Nicole stiffened beside her. Whitfield blinked, confusion knitting his brow. Even he knew what that meant. Intelligence screening wasn't punishment. It was recruitment. High-level evaluation for mission pipeline candidates. The kind who got orders no one spoke aloud. The kind who disappeared on purpose. Her throat tightened. "Sir, I didn't volunteer." Lawson studied her. Not cold, not hard, sad somehow, like he knew exactly what this was doing to her. "Sometimes the uniform volunteers you." A breath froze in her chest. Around her, the formation dissolved into whisper tension. She stepped forward, saluted, and walked. Every step toward the intel building felt like being marched back into smoke, back into fire corridors, back into decisions she didn't want to make again. Inside, the waiting room was quiet, sterile, no posters, no motivation quotes, only blank walls and closed doors designed to strip emotion and replace it with focus. A naval intelligence chief called her name. "Blake, stand easy." She obeyed, hands behind back, eyes forward, training instinctive, but inside her muscles coiled, ready to run without moving an inch. He opened a folder slowly, too slowly, the kind of slow that meant searching for reactions. "Your psychological eval noted high stress tolerance, trauma resilience, strong compartmentalization." Compartmentalization, military language for "you can bury things without dying." He slid a paper across the desk. "Recruitment assessment, blank slots next to mission track fields." "Have you ever considered special operations support?" he asked casually. And just like that, a flash, flames surging down a metal corridor, smoke swallowing sight, her hands blistering against steel, someone screaming on the other side of the hatch. A decision no one else could make, choosing to burn rather than walk away. She blinked once, hard. "No, sir." "Logistics, systems intelligence, tactical air support." "No, sir." His voice softened. "You fit the profile." "I don't want the profile." He folded hands, watching her carefully now. "You're not afraid of action." "No. You're afraid of being needed again." Her breath cracked. He saw it. They always saw cracks in interview rooms. Cracks meant entry points. "I served once," she said quietly. "I don't want to relive it." He paused, not in judgment, in understanding. "Service isn't always pain." "It was for me." A beat of silence heavier than steel. He set down the pen. "We don't pull people who don't want to go. But I'll say this. If you ever decide the world needs you again, the door will not be locked." She didn't speak. "You're dismissed." Outside, the air hit her like cold water. Sharp, alive, grounding, and overwhelming. She leaned against the building, exhaling one shaky breath, then another, but control came back slow, too slow. Nicole appeared before she realized she'd been followed. No words, just presence, solid, grounding, offered like a hand without being extended. "They want something from me," Cassidy murmured. "They want your fire," Nicole replied. "But that doesn't mean you owe them the burn." Cassidy almost smiled, bitter and tired. "Feels like I do." Nicole shook her head. "You don't owe anyone your pain, not even a flag." Before Cassidy could speak, a voice cut the air. "You're not special." "Whitfield." Cassidy turned. His posture was stiff, not hostile, defensive. His pride was wounded and he didn't know how to bleed without attacking. "You think we didn't notice," Whitfield said. The stairs, the secrecy, the officers watching you. What are you, some kind of plant, operator baby, government experiment? Nicole stepped forward, jaw tight. Back off. Whitfield raised his chin, ignoring her. People like you don't end up here by accident. Cassidy stared at him, steady, calm, tired. You want to know the truth, she said softly. He swallowed, maybe expecting a threat, a confession, a title. She gave him neither. I'm just someone who knows what it feels like to burn. His expression faltered, confusion, realization, shame, then something unexpected, hurt, deep, hidden hurt. Whitfield's voice dropped, barely audible. So do I. Nicole blinked, Cassidy's breath caught. Whitfield turned away fast, like he'd let too much slip. Don't make me your example, he muttered and walked off. For a second, neither woman moved. Nicole exhaled. Everyone here's carrying something. Cassidy stared after him. Some of us are just better at hiding it. Nicole didn't disagree. Training resumed, classroom, field drills, and then the simulation bay. Cassidy felt her muscles coil. She'd avoided fire scenarios so far. But today, the module flickered to life, screens showing smoke-filled compartments, flashing warnings, oxygen alarms, emergency procedures for aviation deck fires. Her pulse spiked, breath shallow. The instructor didn't know, couldn't know. To them, this was standard training. To her, it was a graveyard. Blake, the instructor, called. You're up first. Her vision tunneled, sounds dulled. The room shrank around her like a corridor closing. She stepped forward. The simulation hissed to life. Fake smoke pumped through vents. Alarm sirens wailed. Lights strobed emergency red. The screen panel simulated rising temperature. She froze. Not weakness. Flashback. Metal screaming under heat. Real smoke filling lungs. Voices yelling. Someone pounding on steel until his fists went raw. Her own hand reaching, burning, melting. Not here. Not now. Breathe. Her knee buckled. A hand caught her. Garrett, no question, no hesitation, just instinct. You're out, he whispered. I can do it. No, not like this. Nicole moved beside her too. Hey, eyes on me, not the fire. Cassidy forced breath through teeth. Vision flickered, past clawed at present. The instructor snapped. Blake, either execute or step aside. Cassidy closed her eyes. People didn't understand. They saw strength as duty, but they didn't feel the scars, didn't remember the smell of burning hair, didn't hear silent screams inside walls. She opened her eyes again, slow, shaking. I need a moment. Silence hit the room, not judgment, shock. Recruits don't ask for moments. They break or they bury, they don't speak. The instructor hesitated, then nodded almost respectfully. Take one. Cassidy stepped back, breath trembling. Garrett's hand on her shoulder, strong, steady, permission to be human. You don't have to win against memory, he said softly. Just survive it, one breath at a time. Nicole leaned close. The strongest people are the ones who know when not to go back into the fire. Cassidy whispered, I'm tired of burning. No one answered. They didn't need to. Later, in the quiet of barracks after lights out, Nicole sat beside her bunk, elbows on knees, voice low. You don't have to go where they want to send you. Cassidy stared at the ceiling. What if saying no means letting someone else die someday? Nicole swallowed. You don't have to save the world to deserve peace. Garrett's voice came softly from 2 bunks down. Heroes need rest too. Cassidy closed her eyes. Not to sleep, just to hold everything inside before it spilled. She came here to disappear. Instead, she was being seen again, by command, by ghosts, by recruits who didn't know her past but felt her pain. And quietly, painfully, she felt something she didn't expect. Not fear. Not pride. Not hope. Responsibility. The kind you don't choose. The kind that chooses you. She whispered into the dark, voice cracking like scorched metal. I don't want to be a hero again. No one answered. But silence didn't suffocate this time. It listened. And for the first time since she arrived, she let herself tremble not from weakness, but from the exhaustion of someone who once walked through fire to save lives and is terrified the world might ask her to do it again. Because purpose doesn't knock. It hunts, and she could feel it closing in. What if destiny wasn't something you chased, but something that walked beside you quietly until you were too tired to push it away? Dawn came soft and gray, the kind of sky that looks like it's holding its breath. Cassidy rose before reveille quietly, like she'd stopped sleeping and started waiting. Waiting for orders, waiting for ghosts, waiting for the day someone made a decision for her she wasn't ready to make. She sat on the edge of her bunk, hands hanging between her knees. The scars didn't hurt right now, they hummed. Sometimes pain whispered before it screamed, a warning that memory wasn't done with you yet. Nicole stirred across the aisle. She sat up, hair messy, eyes soft with sleep but sharp with awareness. You didn't rest, she murmured. I rested enough. Nicole studied her a second, then nodded, not believing her but respecting the boundary. Today's going to push you. Every day pushes. Not like this. Cassidy didn't ask how she knew. Some people just sensed when storms were close. Morning routine, uniforms, boots, formation, breath steaming in cold air. But instead of drill instructors shouting cadence, there was silence. A car rolled across the courtyard, dark sedan, command insignia. No recruiter car, no shuttle, higher than that. The Admiral stepped out. Conversation died across the base like someone killed the power. Admiral Kirkland walked with a cane, not for weakness, but injury turned badge. His presence felt like tides shifting around them, pressure changing direction. He wasn't here to inspire recruits. Admirals at Great Lakes didn't come to check progress. They came to claim futures. He scanned the formation once. No smile, no stern expression, just eyes like weathered steel searching for one face in a sea of youth. Cassidy's chest tightened. Gravity moved toward her like invisible current pulling shoreline stones back into the ocean. He spoke without asking permission from silence. Recruit Cassidy Blake, walk with me. The world paused. Some recruits turned fully. Others pretended not to look while staring sideways. Nicole's jaw clenched. Garrett's fists tightened, ready to defend something he couldn't define. Cassidy stepped out. Each footfall felt louder than rifle fire in a metal hallway. She fell into step beside the Admiral. They walked the perimeter of the field in silence until voices faded behind them and winter air became the only witness. Finally he spoke. You didn't want this attention. No, sir. You didn't ask for recognition. No, sir. You told the intel chief you don't want a mission path. Cassidy swallowed, correct. He nodded slowly, yet here you are. That silence returned heavy, expectant. Cassidy stared ahead, breath visible in sharp bursts. I learned the hard way, she said quietly. Being the one who can handle the fire means you're the one always thrown into it. And you resent that. Cassidy shook her head, surprising even herself. No, I accept it. I just don't want it anymore. You believe you already served your purpose. I believe purpose almost killed me. He stopped walking, she stopped too. Cassidy, he said, using her name like a weight. Leadership isn't about seeking burden. It's about answering when no one else can. Her jaw tightened. I answered once, I burned for it. And you survived. That's not the same thing as being ready to do it again. A flicker in his eyes, sadness, maybe guilt. He looked out across marching recruits and exhaled. I had a daughter your age. Cassidy's chest hollowed. She stayed still. She was fearless, he continued. Believed service was righteousness, believed courage meant always stepping forward. "What happened?" Cassidy asked softly. "She stepped forward when she should have stepped sideways." His voice broke, then steadied. "Courage without choice is tragedy, not duty." Silence wrapped around them like wind. "You're not here to be ordered," he said quietly. "You're here because you chose to serve, even if your service looks different than expected." He turned toward her fully now. "I will not drag you into fire again." Relief almost buckled her knees. "But I will not pretend you weren't born knowing how to walk through it." That hurt in a way she couldn't name. He held her gaze. "When the time comes, and it will, decide for yourself, not for me, not for the flag, not for ghosts." He began walking away, cane tapping frost-crusted concrete, then paused without turning. "You have a right to heal, Cassidy, but healing and disappearing are not the same thing." He left her standing there, breath uneven, throat raw. Back at formation, recruits pretended they hadn't strained to hear, but the look in their eyes changed. Not awe, not envy. Understanding, the heavy, quiet kind. Whitfield looked away first, shame, pride, and fear braided together. Marcus whispered something like she didn't ask for this. Garrett nodded once at her return. Nicole didn't speak. She just brushed Cassidy's sleeve with 2 fingers, grounding her silently. Day continued, weapons safety, cover and concealment, field communication. But Cassidy wasn't really in the drills. Her body moved, her eyes focused, but inside everything shook like a ship hull under impact. At lunch, Nicole finally spoke. "You froze in Sim yesterday, and today they bring the Admiral. That timing isn't coincidence." Cassidy poked at food she wouldn't eat. "I'm tired, Nicole." "Tired doesn't scare me," Nicole murmured. "What scares me is a soldier who thinks she isn't allowed to rest." Cassidy looked up, not defensive, confused. "Why do you care this much?" Nicole hesitated, then rolled her sleeve up. A scar, thin but deep, like a blade, once kissed her forearm. Cassidy froze. "I cared too late for someone once," Nicole whispered. "I don't repeat mistakes." There it was, her ghost. Everyone here had one, and they all bled differently. Before Cassidy could reply, a tray clattered at the next table, Whitfield standing, fist clenched, Marcus staring. "You think you're special," Whitfield snapped at Marcus. "She carried you, you slowed us down. If she hadn't." "Enough," Cassidy said. Whitfield turned. "No, I'm done pretending. You saved him, you saved me." His voice cracked. He swallowed hard. "I don't like feeling indebted." "You're not indebted," Cassidy said softly. "You're human." Whitfield looked like she'd slapped him with kindness he didn't know how to survive. He grabbed his tray and walked away fast, not angry. Avoiding breaking. Garrett sat down slowly. "You have gravity, Blake." "Gravity sinks things." "No," he murmured. "It pulls lost pieces into orbit." She didn't respond, couldn't. Emotion felt like shrapnel. Afternoon, underwater egress drill, blindfolded, upside-down escape simulation. Water rushed, straps tangled, breathing tube tasted like rubber and panic. Halfway through, a voice sharp panicked, someone trapped in the mock cockpit, flailing, gasping. "Whitfield!" Fight reflex slammed into Cassidy's bloodstream before fear could shout. She reached him underwater, undoing straps, guiding him to surface. Instructor whistles blew. Emergency hands reached. Whitfield coughed, gasped, eyes wide, terrified and ashamed in equal measure. Cassidy held his vest until he found footing. Their faces inches apart, water dripping, breaths ragged. He whispered, raw, broken, "Why do you keep helping me?" She whispered back, "Because someone once helped me when I didn't deserve it either." Silence. He looked like he might cry but swallowed it down hard, nodding once, a surrender, not defeat. That night, after chow and inspection, after the room settled into breathing and rustling sheets, Cassidy slipped outside. Cold kissed her skin. Night wrapped around her like a thin blanket that couldn't warm but could hide. She sat alone on the bleachers, overlooking the dark parade ground. Garrett appeared and sat a distance away, not intruding, just near enough. "You didn't drown today," he said quietly. "I wasn't the one drowning. You both were." She didn't argue. Nicole arrived next, no words, just climbing up to sit behind Cassidy, shoulder to shoulder. Then, unexpectedly, Marcus limped up and sat across from her, awkward and earnest. Moments later, footsteps approached Whitfield, hands in pockets, jaw tight, sitting beside Marcus without looking at her. Not a clique. A formation of the wounded. No one spoke for a long time. Cassidy stared at the field, voice barely a breath. "What if I'm not who they think I am?" Garrett replied first, "Then be who you are." Nicole added quietly, "Just don't stop being her." Whitfield's voice was rough. "Heroes don't get to decide when they're done." Cassidy finally looked at him. "I'm not a hero." Whitfield held her gaze. "Then why does everyone here breathe easier when you're around?" Her breath faltered. Night held them. Stars watched without blinking. Cassidy whispered, almost to herself, "I came here to learn how to live quietly." Garrett answered, "Then learn, but don't punish yourself for being loud where it matters." Nicole's hand found hers, gentle, firm. "You don't have to choose today." Whitfield nodded, surprisingly humble now. "Just don't run." Cassidy blinked slowly. For the first time in a long time, tears threatened. She didn't let them fall, not yet, but the pressure softened. The Admiral's words echoed again. "Healing and disappearing are not the same thing." Tonight, surrounded by people who accidentally became her shield wall, she felt something she thought fire had burned out of her forever. Belonging. Not demanded. Not earned. Given. She breathed. Slow. Deep. Human. And in that breath, she understood a truth she had feared. You cannot heal alone. Fire destroys alone. But healing needs witnesses. The night stayed silent. No music, no speeches, no cinematic swell, just breath, presence, quiet, and the soft hum of a world still spinning even when she wasn't sure she wanted to move with it. For the first time since the flames, she didn't feel like she was holding herself together. She felt held. What if healing wasn't found in distance, but in the moment the world asked you to stand again? The week turned colder. Breath hung heavier, frost biting bare skin at morning muster. Cassidy stood in formation, quiet, composed, but inside, a tremor lived beneath her ribs. Not fear, not dread. Recognition. She knew this feeling too well, the way reality shifts before decisions arrive. The way the air changes before orders drop. Like the universe inhaled and held breath right before someone pointed and said, "You." The instructor stepped forward. "Weapons range today." A murmur passed through recruits, excitement for some, anxiety for others, boredom for the ones who thought guns made soldiers instead of discipline. Cassidy's stomach tightened. Weapons weren't the problem. She was comfortable with machinery, mechanisms, failure modes, physics under stress. It wasn't steel she feared. It was sound. Triggers, echoes, shock waves that could turn a heartbeat into a battlefield. As they moved toward the armory, Garrett whispered, "Breathe steady. Don't chase memory today." She didn't answer, she kept pace, eyes forward, boots precise. Inside, metal clinked, mags stacked, rifles racked. The smell of oil and cold steel hung thick in the air, but her brain smelled something else. Burning insulation, melted wire, human fear and recycled oxygen. She exhaled slow, not panic, not yet, but memory tugged like gravity. Outside on the range, instructors shouted commands against wind. "Bolt back. Check chamber. Safety on until line command." Cassidy followed procedure mechanically, hands steady. Safety manipulations flawless. Muzzle discipline sharp. No one watching would suspect the storm under her skin. Whitfield took position 2 lanes down. His hands shook slightly, not from fear of recoil but pressure. He caught her glance, then looked away, pretending not to need the reassurance he clearly did. Nicole beside her checked her magazine twice, jaw clenched, anxiety hiding under diligence. Garrett rolled his shoulders once, grounding himself like firefighters do before breaching a burning doorway. The instructor stepped behind them. "On my command." Cassidy inhaled. The world narrowed, cold air, gloves against polymer, heartbeat loud enough she could feel pulse inside her teeth. "Fire." Trigger clicks, muzzle blasts, echoes, brass flying, ejecting, ping of metal, rhythmic, violent, controlled. And then, flash. A real alarm long ago, heat behind her neck like a living thing, screams muffled by oxygen masks, electrical pop before ignition. The moment pressure feeds flame and fire finds breath. Her vision blurred, sound warped. Steam and smoke crushed her chest. Her hand tightened on trigger instinctively, but she froze instead of firing. Her rifle hung silent while shots cracked around her. She stared at the target but didn't see it. She saw red light flashing, emergency strobes reflecting in smoke, someone trapped behind a sealed hatch pounding until blood streaked the metal. A hand touched her arm. She flinched so violently she almost dropped the rifle. Garrett stood there, not touching again, just anchoring her with presence alone. The range instructor frowned but didn't speak, saw something human instead of disciplinary. Cassidy exhaled, a shudder, then lowered the rifle, finger off trigger, safe discipline intact even when panic attacked. "I need a moment," she said. The instructor nodded once. No ridicule, no question, just respect. She stepped back from the line, heartbeat heavy, breath too fast. Nicole followed without being asked. She stood close but didn't crowd. "I thought I was past it," Cassidy whispered. "No one gets past it," Nicole said softly. "We just learn how not to drown in it." Cassidy's jaw clenched. Shame curled inside. Shame always finds warriors first, not because they are weak, but because they think they should be stronger. Whitfield lowered his weapon, glanced at her, expression tight. For once he didn't smirk, didn't speak, didn't judge. He just nodded, small, stiff, vulnerable. A truce made of understanding, not words. Cassidy returned to the line when breathing steadied. She fired, controlled, deliberate, not perfect, not fast, but present. When the range ended, Instructor Ellis pulled her aside. "You don't panic like someone who can't handle stress," he said quietly. "You panic like someone who already survived more than this." Cassidy looked down. Surviving isn't the same as being stable. He nodded, voice low. "True, and sometimes it means you need a reason to stay standing." She didn't respond. She didn't need to. He patted her shoulder gently once, a rare gesture from someone who trains war for a living. The day moved into combat med drills, rope climbs, radio signal exercises, but she barely registered them. She felt like she was walking through a memory chamber, present but echoing with ghosts. At chow that night, Nicole finally said, "You know you don't have to prove anything to us, right?" Cassidy stared at her tray. "I'm not trying to prove anything." "Then what are you trying to do?" "I'm trying not to be who they think I am." Garrett set his fork down, brow furrowed. "And who do you think you are?" Cassidy swallowed. "Someone who lived because other people didn't." Silence fell. Marcus spoke from down the bench, voice soft. "Survivor's guilt doesn't mean you failed." "Survivor's guilt means something mattered," Nicole said. Whitfield didn't look up. "Some people don't survive inside even if they survive outside." Everyone froze. Stunned, he said it aloud. He pushed food around like a confession slipped, and he wished he could grab it back. Cassidy's voice softened despite herself. "When did you break?" Whitfield's jaw clenched. "The first time my mother didn't recognize me in the hospital." No one breathed. He finally met her eyes, raw, unshielded. Everyone thinks privilege protects you. It doesn't, it just gives you more to lose. Cassidy nodded, slowly. Truth recognized truth. Later that evening, their class assembled in the briefing hall, screens on, lights low. A briefing officer pointed at satellite imagery, geopolitical flashpoint, naval chokepoint routes, logistics disruptions, threat escalation cycle. Normal training content, until a slide pulsed red. Potential deployment scenario, near-term priority. Recruits stiffened. This wasn't theoretical. This was real-world mapping, and the words below it chilled her. Special operations support pathways under review. A list of roles: technical insertion support, tactical comms, emergency systems engineers, fast response aviation repair teams. Her old world. Her fire. Her ghosts. Garrett leaned close. They're building a pipeline. Nicole whispered, and they want you in it. Cassidy didn't blink, didn't move, but her heart felt like a fuse burning slowly, wire shrinking toward powder. After lights out, she didn't sleep. She sat on her bunk, blanket around her shoulders like armor woven from exhaustion. When Nicole's quiet voice broke the silence, it didn't startle her. I know what it looks like when someone is deciding whether to run or fight. Cassidy stared at the floor. I don't want either. You don't get third options in this life, Nicole murmured. You stand or you hide, and hiding isn't the same as peace. Cassidy closed her eyes, jaw trembling once. Not fear, emotion, heavy and painful. Nicole, I'm tired. Nicole sat beside her, slow, gentle. Then rest. That doesn't mean surrender. Garrett's voice drifted from across the dark room. You don't have to be fire every day. Whitfield's voice, quiet from his bunk, added, but don't become ashes either. Cassidy swallowed hard. For the first time since arriving, she let tears gather. Not fall, not yet, but they lived behind her eyes without guilt. She whispered, I don't want to go back into the fire. Nicole squeezed her arm. Then don't, not now, not until you choose. Silence settled, warm instead of cold. Cassidy lay back. She stared at the ceiling, breathing through the tremors. Tomorrow, command would push harder. Mission rumors would spread. Names whispered, doors opening, pressure rising. The world preparing to ask again whether she would step forward. But tonight she didn't burn. She didn't drown. She didn't disappear. She simply breathed. And sometimes breathing is the bravest thing someone can do. What if destiny didn't arrive with a trumpet blast, but with a quiet alarm in the distance and a single decision that changed everything? The base slept under a hard winter sky, barracks lights dimmed to slivers. Cassidy sat awake long after others drifted off. She wasn't afraid of sleep. She was afraid of what waited behind closed eyes. Fire didn't live in dreams. It lived under ribs, behind scars, breathing slow like something patient. When lights finally shut fully and silence settled, she lay back, clutching her blanket as though cloth could shield memory. She counted breaths, counted seconds, tried to anchor herself to the present. She almost drifted peacefully, not into memory but into quiet. Then the alarm sounded. Not drill tone, not schedule chime. Emergency siren. Instant tension. Bodies shot upright, boots hitting floor. Officers' voices outside, sharp, coordinated, urgent. Base fire response, hangar wing. Her chest seized. Not metaphor. Real, physical constriction, like someone reached inside and squeezed. Hangar fire. Echo of another life, another blaze. Recruits scrambled, grabbing gear, confusion rising like smoke. Nicole stumbled toward her, eyes wide. Is this real? Cassidy nodded, once stiff. Real. Garrett was already lacing boots with practiced precision, controlled even in chaos. Whitfield looked pale but standing. Instructors burst in. All recruits to muster area unless assigned to fire brigade or med assist. Move. Bodies rushed. Feet scrambled. Cassidy stood still for a heartbeat too long, frozen not from fear but from knowing. Fires didn't frighten her. They called her. Garrett saw her stillness and stepped close, voice low. You don't have to go. Cassidy swallowed hard, throat tight. Someone in there. You don't know that. I feel it. Nicole stared at her, not surprised, not confused, heart aching for her. You're not trained for response here. You're a recruit. No, Cassidy's voice cracked, soft and raw. I am someone who knows how fast fire takes people. Before she could move, Whitfield blocked her path, trembling but determined. You're not going alone. She stared at him. He stared back. For once his pride wasn't armor, it was resolve. Garrett grabbed his jacket. We stay together. Nicole exhaled, something like resignation mixed with fierce loyalty. 4 idiots are braver than one. They slipped out before instructors noticed. Not rebels, not renegades, just human beings racing toward danger because some instincts never die once forged in heat. Smoke rose from the far wing, not raging but visible, thick, real. Fire brigade rushed with hoses, foam units, gear. Tech staff shouted inventory counts. Security formed perimeter. A young airman stumbled out coughing, soot-streaked, shaking, terrified. My partner, he gasped. Still inside maintenance bay, jammed panel couldn't. Cassidy didn't wait. She ran. Nicole cursed and followed. Garrett sprinted. Whitfield chased with fear in his breath but courage in his feet. They reached the hangar side door, heat radiating through steel. An officer barked. Hey, recruits back. Cassidy met his eyes, calm, steady, commanding without rank. Where? Second bay left, door jammed, we're getting tools. I don't have time. Before he could reach for her, she pulled her shirt sleeve over her hand and pressed it to the handle, testing heat like she once learned among real flames. Hot, manageable, not blowtorch heat. Fire early stage, oxygen cycling. She forced the door. Smoke billowed, visibility low. Her scars flared like nerve wires sparking under her skin, memory overlapping reality. Nicole grabbed her sleeve. I'm with you. Garrett tightened jaw, keep low. Whitfield swallowed hard and pulled his shirt collar over nose. Don't die. I don't plan to. They moved low to ground, breathing shallow, navigating shadows, sparks overhead, burning chemical smell, a whimper somewhere inside. Cassidy's body reacted before brain commanded, instinct built in agony. Call out, she shouted, answer me. A weak cough left bay. She ran, sliding on slick concrete, ducking beneath hanging cables. A mechanic lay trapped under fallen paneling, leg pinned, eyes wide with smoke, panic. He saw her, shock flickering. No, don't, you'll get stuck too. She didn't answer. She crouched, tried lifting panel, heavy, anchored by tool rack. Garrett jumped beside her, adding weight. Nicole braced footing and pressed too. Whitfield grabbed nearby bar to pry, sweat mixing with soot. On 3, 1, 2. They lifted. Cassidy dragged the mechanic's torso free. His legs scraped loose last second. He cried out, pain but alive. Alarms blared, sprinklers hissed overhead, steam clouded. Cassidy coughed once harsh. Her scars pulsed like living coals. Garrett pulled the man's arm over his shoulder. Move. They half carried, half dragged him toward exit. Heat intensified behind them, fuel splash igniting. Flames licked wall. Cassidy's skin reacted instantly, not from burn, but memory, phantom fire crawling her arms. She kept moving anyway. Outside, hands grabbed the mechanic, medics pulling him onto stretcher. Officers rushed recruits, anger masking shock and confusion. What were you thinking? Whitfield wheezed, we were. Garrett coughed, we acted. Nicole glared, we prevented a casualty. Cassidy just breathed, ragged, shaking, silent. The officer rounded on her. You risked your life, you don't have authority to. A voice cut him off. "Stand down." Admiral Kirkland approached, coat thrown over uniform, urgency carved in his stance. He looked at the rescued mechanic, then at Cassidy, eyes full of battlefield she hadn't seen but felt. "Who led entry?" Cassidy didn't speak. Whitfield pointed. "She did." Nicole nodded. "She pulled first." Garrett added, "Couldn't have done it without her." The Admiral stepped closer, voice low. "You said you didn't want to go back into fire." "I didn't," Cassidy whispered. "But you walked anyway." "I couldn't let him die." He studied her, not evaluating, accepting. "That was your choice." She nodded slowly, voice breaking. "Yes, sir, it was." Nicole touched her shoulder, grounding her. Whitfield avoided eye contact, not out of pride, but because his eyes were red-rimmed. Garrett stood tall, quiet anchor. Captain Lawson arrived minutes later, fury and awe fighting in his face. "You four, do you even understand?" "They didn't disobey," the Admiral said, cutting him off. "They responded." Lawson hesitated. "Sir, there will be no punishment." "But protocol." "Protocol didn't carry that airman out." Silence. And then softer, only for Cassidy. "You didn't ignite the fire this time. You answered it." Cassidy's throat tightened, not pride, not relief. "Peace. Small, fragile, real." They walked back at dawn, smoke still drifting behind them. Recruits watched, whispers, nods, respect earned not from rank but from choice. Nicole bumped her shoulder lightly. "You okay?" Cassidy exhaled. "I'm alive." Garrett smiled faintly. "That's enough." Whitfield looked at her, earnest for once. "Don't ever say you're not someone people follow." Cassidy shook her head softly. "I don't want to lead." "Then don't lead them," Nicole murmured. "Walk beside them." Cassidy breathed deep, cold morning air filling lungs once flooded with smoke and fear. She looked at her hands, scars visible in first light. Once she hated them. Now she saw truth. They weren't reminders of pain. They were proof of survival. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It acts. And sometimes strength isn't in stepping into fire with pride. It's stepping out of fire with heart still open. Cassidy Blake didn't choose heroism. She chose humanity. And that quietly, painfully, beautifully was enough. She whispered into the dawn, not to them, not to the flag, but to the part of herself she thought the flames stole. "I don't want to disappear anymore." The wind carried it, soft, honest, free. Because she finally understood. You don't heal by running from fire. You heal by learning when to walk back out of it.